So, I'm Bob Spangler, and we're here today to try to make sense of this dovetail machine. So anyway, there's a zillion ways to cut dovetails, as you all know. And I do recommend that people learn how to cut them by hand. You know, that's because you understand a dovetail that way. But to do a lot of dovetails by hand it gets old after a while. So I've come up with different machines. I built one like this one here, this wooden one. This was in an old Fine Woodworking magazine years and years ago. I built a Lee-like machine. I've done it by hand, just trying to hold the router by hand. And about 10 years ago, I saw this one online, and it was this English guy, and he had a different concept. I'd never seen the concept before. It was basically a bit and then making a mark over here. And the two are related to each other. And I thought, this is a fascinating concept. And I probably should have just bought the machine from him, but I thought, I want to make my own because I always make my own stuff. And it would have been far cheaper to buy one. So I made this machine. It's an incredible machine. It's for cutting dovetails. This machine, dovetails come in a different angle bit. This machine is for only an 8-degree bit. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It will work with 1/4-inch wide bits or 3/8 or 1/2 inch or whatever. It will work with different size bits, but they all have to be 8 degrees. And basically the way this thing works, this machine, as you'll notice here, this is 8 degrees, and then it's 8 degrees the other way. You can put these straight sides on it here, like so, and then it will just work straight. It'll pull out straight. You can just loosen this Allen screw here and this one over here. Pull this off, put this one on, and then the machine will only go straight.
Can you do box joints with that then?
Well, the reason you do that, the reason you'd want this to run straight is 2 reasons. You could put the dovetail bit in here, and then if you put the dovetail bit in there and it runs straight, then you're actually cutting this. The tail. So then you'd put it in, you cut it straight, and the machine's going to come out and just cut the tail. And then you move it over and you cut the next one. And then you have to change the bit to cut the pin. And this being the pin. Okay. The reason that I set this machine up in my own shop because I want to make dovetails a little quicker than it takes to switch this out all the time, switch the bit, readjust everything. So I almost always use 1/2-inch thick drawer sides. I always use, I pretty much always use the same size bit, but by doing that, this machine is always set. And then I can go in and I can cut the tails with a router table. And the advantage of that is say I got 6 drawers to make. Well, I can take all 6 drawer sides, clamp them together, and run them through the router table like this. Move the fence over, route it through again, turn it over, do the same thing, and then all of the sides are cut all at once. They're done. And then all I have to do is come back and cut the pins with this machine. So I don't have to get into cutting each one of these individually this way, because that's what you would get into. They'd have to be cut individually. Here I'm doing 6 or 8 or whatever at a time. And then I can just skip all that and just do this here. You have to cut these one at a time, but still it's very quick. So the nuts and bolts of how this works is basically you'll put your blank piece in here. So we'll take a blank piece. So say we had all 6 of these cut with the router table now, and we want to cut the pins next. So what we do is we take this here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, I'm actually going to make a box for you right here and show you how this works, because the sequence of what goes where, when, is important too. So I'm just going to take 4 of these right now, and we're going to set it up just like we would be making a box. And one thing that's important on this is that all your pieces are the same width. And when you're making a drawer, for example, you know that the back piece is always a little shorter, so you can slip the bottom in from the back. But to begin with, you keep all the pieces exactly the same. So what we do is we take, this is going to be our say this is one drawer or one box. So we got sides and then we got the front and the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and clamp it together. It's going to be our sides. We'll clamp this together and then we'll take a pencil. So your dovetails can go anywhere, and that's the beauty of this machine. It's infinitely adjustable. You can put the dovetails wherever you want them, and then it'll match it to it'll match the pins to wherever you lay out your dovetails. The only thing you have to keep in mind is say your bottom is here, your dovetail would have to be above that, obviously, for the back piece. So let's just say our bottom is here. Okay, so we can put a dovetail wherever we want it. And these are through dovetails. This machine will also do half-blind dovetails. It'll do finger joints. It'll do sliding dovetails, all that business. Today we're just doing through dovetail joints. That's all we're doing today. So let's just say, this could be arbitrary. Let's just say we're going to make one here. And for simplicity's sake, we'll make one over here that's the same distance from the side away. So that way we'll run it through the router table, turn it around, run it through the router table, flip it over, do this, do this. Now we've cut four of our pins. So we're going to go over here to the router table now, and I'm going to cut these pins here and here, and here and here, and here and here, and then we'll come back, or tails, and then we'll come back here and cut the pins. So I just use the fence like this to get these lined up nice and square. And then you know they're flat on the table. They're square this way as well. Put your clamp on. Make sure your clamp is at least up above the table or the fence so it slides by. We're going to have to move it when we flip it over. So then you're going to you need to set the height of this bit, your dovetail bit, to the thickness of the wood. And the best way to do that is just take your piece of wood, lay it right on here, and just raise the bit up to the same thickness as the material. So you can just lay this on here, just raise it up, and I'll drag my finger across it. If I slightly feel the top of the bit, that's about right. So, and then slide the fence in, whatever you want to do it, and clamp it down.
Yeah, as soon as he's ready.
Yeah, go ahead and plug it in. When you're doing the router table here, remember to put this smaller plate in here so that this can't fall down in the hole, obviously, or even slightly dip down in the hole or you're going to wreck things. It's good to have a pusher board behind that's good and square. So you keep this square this way. So we're going to run this through, turn it around, run it through, flip it over, and do the same thing. And we've cut 4 pins, or four tails. So that was pretty painless, I think, in terms of cutting the tails. And you know they're all the same. They're all the same depth. Everything is cool. Like I said, this can be any 8-degree dovetail bit you want. The only thing that's critical is setting the depth to the thickness of the wood.
So that's a dovetail bit that that's a bit that you provided.
This is the bit that I brought, or I provided you guys, and I like the shape of this bit because it's a little, it looks more like a hand-cut dovetail. There's other bits. I'll get one here. This is a carbon tip bit. This is a solid steel bit. And I like the solid steel bits. They're great. It has a little thinner shank right at the bottom than this one does. This would cut the same depth, but it's going to be fatter. So I like the proportions of this bit better. The problem in the community wood shop is that these bits are really expensive, you know, and these are not expensive. So it's a trade-off. And these, sometimes I've bought these bits and it might last for 40 drawers. The next bit it might break on the first one. So you never know. So when I buy them, I buy 6 or so at a time because I want to have a stockpile in the drawer because I don't want to be in the middle of a project and I run out of bits. So
When you say it breaks, does the top break off?
it breaks. See, it's thinner down here. It breaks. It breaks at the thinnest spot.
And is there a safety issue in a community shop over that? Or does it
No,
just
there's not a safety issue. It just breaks and it just quits. It just disappears. You know, they make one bit that's even it's a really fine bit. I had one. And it's so the shank gets so narrow on it that I just gave up on them. They break so often and they're too expensive to throw away. So, but this one seems to last a while. And like I said, they're steel. You can touch them up, which is nice. With a little diamond card, you can touch them up. But I've got one in my shop now. I probably made 30 drawers for the thing. It's still going. I can't believe it. But the next one will probably break the first time I use it. So this is done. So we're going to go back over now. Now we're going to cut the pins. So. You know, there's many ways to cut these as well, and you could cut them by hand, you could cut them with a bandsaw, but this is, you know, they're all the same. Right now we know everything's symmetrical because I turned it around. If we would have had one of these dovetails here and we'd have had the other one closer, for example, we obviously couldn't do this. So right now it doesn't matter. So these are your sides. So now you got a back and you got a front. So the first thing I do when I'm doing this is I just take these guys and I'll pick which side, you know, I like the best, that I want inside or outside or whatever. Lay it out just like it's going to be your box or your drawer. And then just do this. And I put a line here, a line here, a line here, and a line here. That's my bottom. I recommend you do that because you'll get mixed up if you don't. And then tip them back up like so. And then in the front, I'll put an X here, and an X here, and maybe an O here, and an O here. And you can use whatever symbol you want. Just, it keeps you oriented now, and it keeps you oriented later when you start cutting the groove for the bottom, because it's awful easy to get this mixed up and you cut the groove on the wrong side. And that can happen. And if you've made your dovetails that aren't symmetrical, for example, then you've screwed everything up. Okay, so now we want to cut the pins. Let's say we want to cut the pins on this corner first. So just take this corner and just fold it together like a hinge. And then as long as you hold it this way, you're okay. And then take it over to the machine. And this piece goes here. So I did it just like this. We're going to go this corner here because I got the X on. So let's just do this. Fold it just like an X, like a hinge. Take it over here. Keep it that way. This one goes here. This one goes there. So the inside, that's where our mark is. It says inside facing out. This is for through dovetails. So the inside's facing out. And this one here, the inside's facing, outside's facing this way. The inside's actually facing in. But so adjust this. These clamps here, you can loosen the little Allen screw under here, raise the handle clear up, and then just tighten. It doesn't have to be overly tight. That's just a little cam clamp. And this one here goes over here. Just line it up with the top. And
pin piece all the way up to the.
this went all, I just made it flush with the top.
The other one, it's pushed
This one over here has got to be all the way against the bottom because this is, right now, this is set to be a 1/2 inch deep. So you got to set that. One thing you can do is you could bring this, you could set that, bring this down and touch the top of the wood, and then you should have a 1/2 inch back here. And one way to check that is you can put a piece back here and see if it fits in there, you know. Anyway, that's, by me, usually I have this, everything is set, so it's all set. I never have to readjust anything. Now the next step is this little mark on here corresponds with the center of the bit here. So what you want to do is you want to line this first dovetail up to be right in the center of that slot that you have there. It's okay? So, and now this is the piece we're actually cutting here. And you notice on these pins that the narrow part is going to end up toward you, toward the operator. So here's a, you know, the narrow part, if you ignore this, this is the waste we haven't cleaned out yet, but here, there's your pin right here. But the narrow part's always toward you. And remember that, because when you start cleaning out the excess here, if you see the narrow part, you don't want to clean it out because that's your pin. So now the sequence here is you're going to bring the router and do this one, and then you're going to go this way. And then you're going to come over and do this one, and then go this way. And what you're going to do first is establish your pins. So here's the pin, and here's the pin. So we're going to do that first, and then we're going to come in and clean out the excess later. So if you're doing your first one, and we could change bits and put a different bit in here, and it wouldn't fit. This wouldn't fit anymore. So right now it's adjusted. It's going to cut the perfect pin for that slot. But if it doesn't, if it's too tight, for example, you have to loosen this, loosen this, loosen this, and loosen this. And then whether it needs to be tighter or looser, it says here if it needs to be looser, this whole plate goes back a little bit. If it needs to be tighter, the whole plate comes forward. So for example, if we wanted to cut this 3/4 inch, gee, it cuts pretty good dovetails. So if you wanted to cut this one, that pin has to be a lot bigger. So we'd have to loosen these and move this whole plate out because it would have to be, it'd have to be a bigger dovetail. If it's too tight and it needs to be looser, we have to move the whole thing back. So that's the adjustment on this thing. I'll show you how to adjust later, and I'll show you how to get it in the ballpark to begin with. So,
But if somebody's coming in and doing dovetails and whatever, the recommendation would be test stock.
the recommendation would be, if somebody's going to come in here and cut a bunch of dovetails, and say I want to make one box, I might come in here and I might have 6 pieces of wood, all the same size, so I have 2 pieces to test. So, and that's important, that you test your joint first. Jeff mentioned the other day, if it's harder wood, I like to use poplar for drawer size because poplar's a little forgiving. And for example, if this was oak or cherry or something like that, not quite as forgiving, your dovetail, if it was as tight as this one here, we might not get it in there. So you might need to readjust the machine slightly. But okay, so we put this in here and we put this one in here. Okay, so let's turn that vacuum on, and I'm going to cut the first pin and then move it and cut the second pin, and then to clean out, okay, we're going to cut the first pin and then the first cut here, second cut, third cut, fourth cut. And then it's a matter of cleaning out. And then when we clean out, we want to cut in a clockwise direction. This way we're going counterclockwise, but when we clean out, we're going to go clockwise. And the reason for that is it won't split all this out. And if you go the wrong way, you'll know right away because it'll really blow out here. But
So
if you
you
go,
climb cut in between.
yeah, we're going to go clockwise. Is that a climb cut? I think that's climb cut. Yeah. So, all right. So go ahead and turn that on. So, okay, now the pins are established. Now we're just going to clean out, and it's just a matter of cleaning the excess out. The one thing keep in mind that when you go this way, the first cut, you want to keep it against the edge back here and the edge up here. If it goes this way, you're cutting into your pin. And when you're going the other way, same thing. Keep it against this side, that side back there. If you come off of that, it's just like cutting a board on the table saw with a fence. If it comes away from the fence, you've lost what you were trying to achieve. So these are your fences now, and that's your fence when you're going the other way. So, and when you're cleaning out, you don't have a fence. You're just cleaning out. So when you look down here, you can see, you guys can look down here, you can see that's the pin, right?
Yes.
Because the front side of it is right there. So we want to make sure that we're not going to see, I like to set it this so I can't even see that pin
Right.
when I look down through the hole.
Okay.
Or clear over here on the edge, I can't even see that pin. Sometimes your dovetail might be so close that you can see the pin, but then you just have to make sure to avoid it. But that's the key, is don't hit your pin. So I'll just go ahead and clean that out. Now we're going to go clockwise. Now, there's your mark and there's your mark, so that goes back together that way. And if it's too tight, I'll set it over here on the table and we get a little mallet. If this is too tight, we'll find out right now. And maybe it's too tight and then we have to readjust. The beauty of it is we can put this right back in that machine and recut again. It looks like it's a little tight, so we'll see. See, that's too tight. I can't get it in there. So we're going to have to readjust, and we'll move the machine out. So these got to be a little looser. They're too tight. So
Then you gotta loosen these guys and shift it that way.
exactly. So loosen, we're going to move it back that way. And it's kind of a hit or miss at this point, but we'll put this back in here. Put this one back in here. And we're just going to have to loosen these and move this slightly back. It's just a hair too tight. Yeah, you can put a little mark on there to remind yourself of how far you're moving it. Doesn't matter where the mark is, right there. I put marks on here to try to line things up, but that gives you some visual reference of how far you moved it. And that was close enough. I wouldn't move it very much at all, but you'll just have to check it now. These are to take, the little pins here to take these off and put the straight ones on.
So to move it, you actually move the jig that way.
Move the whole plate,
I
the
get
whole
it.
plate.
These aren't changed.
No,
These
but I
don't
get it.
change.
Okay.
The whole plate slides
I
up
get
in
it.
this
The whole
mechanism.
plate is sliding back. But you can see how far I have to move it from a 1/4 inch bit to a 3/8. It has to move that far.
Oh, yeah.
So we're not moving it very much at all. When
Oh, okay, that's what those guys are for.
yeah, one of them's for, that was sort of a generic.
Got it.
Okay, here we go again. Now we've got a good fit. So that's how you adjust the machine.
Yeah, that's good.
So that you know, if that was cherry, I think it's still too tight.
Right.
But for poplar, I can get it in there. But for a hardwood, it's probably still too tight. Well, if you're going to do finger joints, we could still use that same straight bit. For example, we'd have to put on these guys here so it just pulls straight out. The way you do that then is you put your test piece in here. Say this is our test piece. And you got the straight bit on there. Just make one cut. Don't move anything. Don't move the machine. Take it out and say that was where it cut. Right there. So you know exactly where that's going to be. You can take this and put it over here. And then don't move anything, but take a square and just square this back here and back there. Make a mark on here, and you know exactly where the bit's cutting then. And then when you cut your negative parts of the finger joint, you would just avoid that. So you cut on the other side. So you know the bit's going to be cutting here, over there, and now you want to remove this part over here and this part over here in the piece that's going over here. So you'd move it, line that up there, so it's going to cut that off. Move it clear back over here, so it's going to cut this off. And then now you got the opposite piece in there to fit this. So you just make the mark, make the cut, take the piece, put it over here. Now, some people do the same. Some people do the same with this, but it means you have to change the bit, put the straight guides on here, put a test piece in there, pull it through with just one cut. It doesn't matter where it's at, and it'll make a pin, or it'll make a dovetail. Say you put that board in there, you pull it straight out with the dovetail bit, and say it made it right there. Then you put it over here, and you transfer that line right over to there. Draw it on there. Let's just say, so we hit the mark. So say that's where it was. You just transfer that line right over there, and you know exactly where that point is in terms of where the bit was. Now you know exactly where everything is. But this mark here is close enough to the center that if you eyeball it, I think you'll be fine. But if you want to be dead on, that's the way to check it. So what we can do is we can all practice with this now, and then you can all make one of these. I'm not going to do the rest of it because you know how it is, but just remember that when you're doing the pieces, just remember, see there's our X, and then fold it up. Okay, so we cut all the sides, say all the sides are cut and they fit now. Then we'd take it over to the table saw and we'd make our slot for the bottom. And I usually just make a 1/8 inch slot, the width of the saw blade, and cut it out. So, cut it out. And I like to go halfway through. I just a tiny bit less than halfway through. So I do all this side, this side, this side. That's why you put these marks here too, so you know where you're cutting your bottom. And then when you get ready to cut the back, I said to go slightly less than halfway through. So I'll run it through, turn it over, run it through, and that piece is still hanging there but just by a tiny little hair, you can just break it off. And then it's good to go. And you know it's going to match your other slots. So we could do that real quick, and then you'll just see how that works. But when I'm cutting the slot for the drawer bottom, I will just eyeball that. You can measure it if you want halfway through. Move the fence over to where you want the top of your bottom to be. Clamp it down, and So just run this through. You mark. See how it's left just a tiny bit? Usually you can just break that off. And then you clean that off, and you're good to go. So,
And the reason to do that is so,
well, the reason I don't cut all the way through is I don't want that piece to go flying out the bottom.
I know, but the reason you make the front of the drawer shallower or shorter,
This is the back of the drawer.
the back of the drawer.
So then it's here.
Oh, so now you can slide it in.
Now you slide your bottom in from the
You
back.
might put a brad or something.
You can always take, that way you can always take your drawer bottom in and out. And you can build a box, if this is just a box, you wouldn't do it. But with through dovetails, you're going to see that little slot. And that becomes problematic. You know, if you want to have a finished box, you want to have through dovetails, you're going to see that bottom hole there. So then you either got to somehow stop that groove. So then you're either cutting it with a router table or something. But this is basically for a drawer. This is for a drawer, basically. So then you slide your drawer bottom in, and then you put one nail or screw in the bottom, and you're good to go. So this is a nice thing because it prevents that piece from flying out. I don't have one of these, so that's why I don't cut quite all the way through. It prevents that piece from flying. I just flip it off and it's done. But
Baltic ply?
if I was using Baltic ply, I probably wouldn't use that steel bit. I would use a carbon tip bit then. Because the steel bit the Baltic ply is going to be hard on that steel bit. But then you could use the little carbon tip bit, it would be fine. And this, it should be fine as long as you're going the right direction. If you're not, it's going to splinter horribly.
Okay.
But remember, counterclockwise when you establish a pin, clockwise when you're doing the other. And I made some little printouts that showed that, but I forgot to bring them, so I'll give them to you. But
Holding it firm and pushing it straight through and not having it do any of that.
as long as you got the pusher board behind it,
Right.
like this, and you keep it against the fence, and you don't, this can't fall down in the hole.
Right. But you have to go all the way through and feel that come all the way through.
Yeah,
So
and
if you use a thicker pusher board, that would probably give you more.
it would give you more stability up
Yeah.
going that way. Well, one thing that I do sometimes, say I've got four sides I'm doing all at once. I'll line them up best I can, put my clamp on there, and then I might take them over to the diff sander. And as long as your clamp's out of the way and you got a guide on there, you can just touch that so you know these are all exactly the same. And then
So that.
and then turn it around and do the same on the other end. And then you know you got a flush cut everywhere. Okay, so basically that's the machine. And I think you know how to adjust it now. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube from Wood Rat, which you might want to take a look at. They're really good. This machine is incredibly flexible. I mean, he's cutting half laps with it. He's cutting sliding dovetails, mortise and tenon, but it's all set up. You know, it's just, you're setting it up all the time, and I only use this to do what we just did. So that's a machine that's dedicated only to cutting the pins for that. And then it saves me a heck of a lot of time because I can make a drawer in 30 minutes. It's no big deal with through dovetails. It's no big deal. And this machine will also cut half-blind dovetails. It becomes a whole different setup, and that'll be a different day altogether because it's more problematic, but it will do it. So if you want to play with it, and then I'll be here. So if you got any questions, you can shoot and.